Hello and welcome back to the SecurityMetrics podcast. I'm Jen Stone. I'm a principal security analyst here at SecurityMetrics, and I am very excited about our guest today. Let me tell you a little bit about him, and I have a prop. So stand by. If you're listening to it and you're not watching this on YouTube, you're going to have to imagine the prop because I'm going to use it a couple of times, but it still will be good on audio, so don't stress too much. All right. Our guest today is Curtis Brazzell. He is the principal security consultant for Pondurance, and super excited about talking to him because he wrote these books for children. But before I get into that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bio on Curtis. He's passionate about the cybersecurity field for nearly 25 years. I feel that. Curtis brings both a wide and deep technical skill set while also demonstrating management and team leadership skills to protect organizations against cyber threats. So he and I were just talking before the show about what he actually does there at Pondurance, and he leads their red team, does penetration testing, that type of thing. So I think in a lot of ways, we have a lot of really similar interests in cybersecurity and helping different organizations. Curtis has a strong desire to always continue learning and comes from a mostly self-taught and hands-on experience background. He gives back to the community with technical security research and offers general security advice to a less technical audience, which I'm super excited about because if you're in cybersecurity, knowing how to use the right words and the right examples to explain things to people can be really hard. And he's the author of the popular children's book series, stand by for the prop, the Cybersecurity ABCs. So I have with me here M is for malware. There are two other books in this series so far, I mean, maybe I don't know. We'll ask if he's writing more or not. But where he introduces security concepts to a younger audience. Now, if you don't have children or if you are not younger, don't worry. These are cool. My marketing team actually were the ones who found these books and found Curtis and were so stoked about him that they're like, you have to talk to him. And then they gave me the book and I said, you're not getting that back. So this is now on my bookshelf. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Jen, for having me on here. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
Did I get any of that wrong in my intro? Is that
no?
Awesome.
You nailed it.
Yay! So the marketing team they liked your book so much they said, okay, we want to get these books. We want to maybe put our logo on it and hand it out at conferences. And we were kind of going down that path. And then something weird happened with the last year where conferences in person didn't really happen. So we have a bunch of books. And I've been given permission to do a giveaway. So I'll give details on the giveaway at the end of the show. And they're super cute. They're super worth having. And we will also give instructions on where to go buy them. One of the fun things about being on the video part of this podcast is we can see what you've got behind. So tell me a little bit about your office there, Curtis, before we dive in.
If you can call this an office anymore. Yeah, so I fulfill my own books, at least the ones that go to the U.S., and so I had, pallets upon pallets of boxes delivered to my home. And I don't have a lot of space here, so I had to put them all around me. So whenever I'm on a conference call or anything, you can see stacks of boxes until I fulfill all of these things.
Nice.
So I'm a little motivated to sell these also just to get them out of my house.
You'd like your space back? Yeah, and you used to sell them on Amazon, but don't anymore. And so that's another thing that we'll give the link where people can go and purchase their own. When we post this, it'll be on our website, and also we'll talk about it towards the end of the show. But first of all, what made you write these books? What made you go, hey, I think I'm going to write books for children?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I have 3 little ones under 5, and as you spend a lot of your evenings reading the same old material over and over again, and it just makes you think while you're reading it, especially the younger children. And when you're doing the ABC books, for example, we have a variety of ABC books here. And, you can't help but be a little bit of a backseat driver when you're reading those.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, if I did these, I'd do these slightly differently, maybe. You're going through the animal ABCs and They don't have a Y, so they use yawn, for example.
Yeah.
And that bothered me. I was like, why don't they use yak or something? Like little things like that. And so it gets me thinking, I would love to write a children's book. Not necessarily because I think I could do it better, just because I think it would be a fun experience, but I don't have a lot to contribute knowledge-wise. What can I do that hasn't been done before? And then it just hit me one day, cybersecurity is something I'm, the most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
If I have an area of expertise at all, it's got to be cybersecurity. It's been a passion of mine, like you said, for a long time. I've always thought that concept was a little too complicated in some areas, unless you're talking about like privacy and things like that. But then I thought, no, kids are really smart.
Sure.
Let's just throw it out there. It'll be fun for the parents too. And so I just kind of started thinking through, if I did an ABC book, first of all, are there even enough letters in the alphabet for every cyber, or let's flip that and say, are there enough terms to cover every letter in the US alphabet? And so I just started drafting them out, A through Z. Can I come up with enough generic cybersecurity terms that aren't too big or too overly complicated for a younger audience, but something that would also be fun for the adults? So that's kind of how that originated.
And then what I also like about that idea is that even if you don't explain everything about a term, at least they've heard it. And so sometimes when I'm talking to people, they've never even heard the word YubiKey, for example. But
Sure,
if you've got it in the younger audience, you've got some cyber literacy that starts really, really young. Even if they don't know what something is, they do know if they've heard the term, and so then they're not trying to learn that there is a term and then what it means and all of these things. So just knowing that a word exists, I think, is a step towards being able to teach people what it means. So I think that's definitely value in that. But let's talk about the illustrations, which I love. These are so cute.
Yes.
Tell me about how you chose an illustrator for these.
Yeah, so that was one of the original challenges, right? I've never created a book. I was going to draw them myself originally, which is hilarious because if you look at my sketch drawings, I mean, they would have been boring. Thank goodness for my wife and kids, because I came up with some pretty cool terms, I thought. But then, I was going to do like B is for buffer overflow. And then I had this input box that looked like an HTML form field. And then I had characters going past the limit. And then I'm like, that's not a very cool illustration at all. And but how can I take a term like buffer overflow and relate it to a real world scenario where kids can see characters acting out whatever that represents? And I think it was my wife that was like, "What about cute monsters or something?"
Nice.
And so one of the first things, I was like, "Well, I can't draw monsters. I'm a pretty awful illustrator, at least when I'm trying to come up with something unique." And I didn't want these to look like anything else. I didn't want to there's a million different, illustrated monsters out there for kids. And I hired a bunch to basically do one illustration. And I came up with a pretty challenging first couple of ones. So like Zero Day was one of the first ones I had people do, which was a pretty complicated illustration. And then Unauthorized Access was the other one. And so if the illustrators could come back and kind of get what I was thinking in my head, because it's really hard to convey a concept like that into an illustration. And I tried not to micromanage too much, but I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted each one to represent. Because I didn't expect the illustrator to also have a cybersecurity background. That's kind of a stretch.
That might be a little unreasonable, yeah.
But I found this one illustrator, Amanda Matthews. She was an award-winning illustrator. I thought, well, she's going to be expensive, but let's try it. Let's have her test a couple out, and she did amazing. I mean, and she's the one I ended up ultimately going with. Long story short, she ended up quitting Fiverr after the first book, and I thought, I didn't know if I was going to make any more books, anyways. But fortunately, we had a relationship so I was able to go back and basically beg her to come back and do the other two books. And she said she had so much fun doing the malware one that she did agree to it. And that's why we have the 3 books now. And
tell me the names of the other 2 books.
So R is for Red Team and B is for Blue Team are the other 2 books in the series. And I wanted one. So the first one, M is for Malware, was more generic. because I thought it was the only one I was going to do. So, it covers concepts across all of information security. R is for red team. Focuses on just offensive cybersecurity concepts, where B is for blue team, focuses on the defensive techniques. So I thought each one might be a little bit more personalized to each person's career. Somebody that's in cybersecurity might get a kick out of, I'm a pen tester, I would like the red team one, or I work in a SOC, I would like the blue team one, or, I do forensics or something like that. So that was my goal, was to try to just bring it home and to try to tie up, as much of the field as I could in three small books.
And what a fun idea for a gift for someone who is a like a colleague who's a pen tester who is in the SOC. If anybody knows anything about cybersecurity, we like our kitschy little things. Every time I walk past other people's desks, all you see is these little, squishy toys and other things that we've picked up at various conferences. And this is definitely a fun thing to add. So when you think about, back to M is for malware, it covers a lot of ground. And so how did you, and you thought it was going to be the only one. So how did you settle on the topics that just in the alphabet that's in this book?
Well, that's a good question. So some of them were just, I came up with them only because it's really hard to come up with certain letters. Specifically, when you get down to the end of the alphabet and you're talking about X, Y, and Z, those are extremely hard letters to try to come up with. And so some of those, like YubiKey, for example, I try to avoid brands and specific products, because I kind of want these books to be timeless, as timeless as you can be in security. I know the field changes dramatically and quickly. Sure. But I didn't want to date myself too much. But YubiKey is one of those things where, it was that or Y2K or something. There weren't too many, and I didn't feel like that really had a place in the cybersecurity space. Yeah, and it's way behind us, especially for kids. They're like, that's 100 years ago.
Who was even alive then?
Yeah, that was like before the dinosaurs or something. Anyway, so some of those, just having a difficulty finding a term dictated what those letters were going to be. And then other ones, I came up with multiples. I came up with maybe 10 letters or 10 terms per letter. I had a Microsoft OneNote that I just wrote down each one that I thought of. And I would think about it while I was driving to work. I'd be thinking about it when I went to appointments and things like that. And anytime I thought of something, I would stop and add it to the list. And eventually I just kind of filtered out the rest of them and chose one. And often I would choose one based on what I thought would be easiest to conceptualize visually. And certain ones were great terms, but I thought, that would be really hard to act out in a scene.
Yeah.
How in the world am I going to take like Java deserialization, for example, and turn that into something that the kids understand?
Right. But what I like is that Java deserialization actually made the cut. So
yeah, and it's one of the only ones that really doesn't depict what it means in the illustration. I just had fun with it. So if you look at that one, the Java's the coffee.
I kind of like cereal, so maybe that's why I like deserialization, but also the weird pun. So yes. Were there any ones that you kind of wanted to put in, but it was just too hard?
Yeah, and those ended up ultimately making the cut in the red and blue team ones, because I was, again, getting to the point, especially when you do it 3 times, right? You get to the point where it's like, man, we're really grasping for letters here, for terms. And I didn't want to budge. There were people that were like, hey, why don't you just take the second letter like they do in some alphabet books? They capitalize on exfiltrate, and they'll do the E, the X, as the letter X, and they'll make it big and bold. And I thought, no, I didn't want to compromise. I was pretty particular about what I wanted. I wanted the first letter to make the most sense. That's kind of why I went that route with those.
Okay, so which one is your favorite?
Ooh, that's a good question. I should have thought about that before this podcast.
Do you have a favorite, or is it more like your kids where, of course you don't have a favorite, but you do, but you just don't say it?
No, I have a favorite. I think my favorite, and it was originally the biggest pain for me and the biggest headache, again, was why, but this time in the red team book. So why so serial is a tool. I assume a lot of our listeners are familiar with it. It's to exploit Java deserialization vulnerabilities. Okay. So it ties back to Java deserialization again, which has always been the hardest concept for me. So now I have to I come up with a way to conceptualize a tool that exploits Java deserialization. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how in the world am I going to come up with a graphic? But I have to pick this term. There's like nothing else I can think of. So I thought about it, and I literally had dreams about it when I was trying to sleep. Nice. I'd wake up thinking about it in the middle of the night. And finally, I was watching Star Trek and just nerding out and watching an episode of Star Trek. And probably instead of doing a deliverable or something I was supposed to be working on. And you know how they materialize and dematerialize? Uh-huh. And they're, oh my goodness, all the Star Trek nerds are going to get upset with me now because I assume it's called a transporter.
That's okay. We'll let them be upset.
It basically decompiles or takes apart your atoms and your mm-hmm. molecules and then recompiles them on the other side. And I thought that is just like deserialization. You serialize data and you deserialize data. And so it hit me, I could have a monster stepping into one of these transporters where they're getting, dematerialized. And, Java deserialization is where you're basically manipulating that payload so that it'll come out, and do something different when it's, reserialized. So, or deserialized. And anyway, my point is, after thinking about this forever and almost going crazy, and you can see why talking about it, I thought I'll have a little robot in there because the robots are supposed to be the red team and they're kind of playing tricks and trying to exploit the blue team. He'll be flipping a switch and changing the location. So in the attack, they're making the dragon basically come out at a different location than he anticipated, which I thought pretty well wrapped up the Java deserialization.
I love that you're giving these kind of metaphors and examples of how something fairly complicated works. So I think that maybe your next book should be using these stories and non-technical things to explain very technical concepts because they're hard. I decided to give myself a challenge this year. And so I'm learning how to do JavaScript and like all of the full stack web developer, taking a course, right, online. It's awesome. It's not fun. I'm not having a good time. It's really, really hard. I have so much respect for developers. But what I find is when I get stuck, I'll go to YouTube and say, all right, somebody find me an explanation that is not just telling me this is the term, this is how it works, this is how you use it. I want to know. I want something that I can hang the ideas on in my head that are not technical. And so I think that's the real value in some of these things that you're putting in your book is how do we take the non-technical and use them to explain the technical. I think it helps settle things in our heads better. And so maybe you could do like the next Step Up book for like middle schoolers. Just as an idea. That's
a good, that's a great idea. And there's a lot of people out there I've noticed that I follow on Twitter and other social media platforms where they, create these awesome infographics. I'm sure you've seen them go around too, where they take, complex topics and they break them down and they make them really understandable. Yeah. And I think that's really, really neat that people do that.
It's so much better than just using technical terms to explain technical terms, and because that kind of keeps up the barriers to understanding when people are trying to just get into cybersecurity. So a lot of the people who listen to this show are not technical cybersecurity people. And I love that because it means that we have a chance to talk about technical things to non-technical people and hopefully be successful in that. But there are also some technical people who listen to it as well. So hopefully there's value in what you're doing to people of all stripes. So it sounds also like when I was reading through the thing, what I really liked is that the very end of the book of M is for Malware, there's online safety tips. Don't chat with strangers on the internet, right? Never provide personal information without approval from a parent or guardian. So tell me more about why you decided to put that at the end of your book.
Yeah, I put that. I ended up adopting that same strategy for all three books, and I did that because there's not a lot of this is for kids, under a certain age. There's not a lot of space. It's a 6x6 book, so there's not a lot of space for text. I wish I could describe every term in detail, and why it's in there and why it's important. There's not physical space on the page. So I wanted at least a page at the end. I didn't want to do a glossary. I felt like that was a little too tacky for a kid's book, a board book. But I did want to do safety tips because that's important to me. I have a passion for, keeping people safe online, especially young ones, especially as my own kids are starting to grow up. I want them to be safe online. So the things, that we all kind of understand as adults that you shouldn't do, be safe online. And that includes everything you just mentioned. I wanted to put that in the book, and I wanted to kind of drive that home, for different concepts like cyberbullying and things like that. Look out for things that make you uncomfortable, and tell your parent, tell an adult, if anything makes you uncomfortable that you see online, because I want that to be a conversation. And this whole book is about, I don't expect kids to pick this book up and understand the concepts right away by themselves. I don't expect them to scan the QR code and go out there and read the glossary. Sure. I want to empower the adults to teach. And so they don't have to tell the kids everything that goes into an illustration, like I just explained with, the deserialization and the lyso serial tool. I don't expect that, but I do hope it opens up a broader conversation.
Sure.
When you're online, don't give out your data. Be careful if you click on links, things like that. It really boils down to those basic messages.
Right. I forgot to mention the QR code, which is on the inside of the front cover. So you can scan that, and it takes you to a glossary, and it has not only more information about the term, but how the illustration is representing that term. So you can kind of connect those ideas in your head between the illustration and the concept itself. And I think that's great because, like you said, you don't want to put all of that information in the book. What a turnoff that would be to most little kids to have, what are all of these words on the page that I cannot read and it doesn't make sense when I do. Right. But when they're ready for more information, or if the parent wants more information, they can go and look at the glossary. It gets them a little bit a step farther into their understanding. And sometimes that's enough to then go seek out more information. I love that today, if I don't understand something, I can go pull out my phone, type it in, find out all of the information in the world about pretty much any topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so often it just starts with, do you have that curiosity sparked to be able to go and do that? And so I have some friends who, when they don't know something, they're just like, I just don't know that. And I'm like, let's find out. What is, let's go find that out. Yeah. It's just so silly things. We're sitting around the other day talking about this fish called a Chucky Mad Tom. Why is it called a Chucky Mad Tom? I don't know. So then we go down this rabbit hole of it's some kind of catfish in the South, right? And so and the idea that we can start with a term that is completely unfamiliar to us and then go down that rabbit hole of all of this information that is available to us for free. And it's the same thing in the cybersecurity world. If you want to find the information, if you want to understand something better, all you need is the curiosity sparked first.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kids are often the ones that get us thinking, right? As adults, they ask questions that we wouldn't think of sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And, if you want to see a picture or something, that's my kid now all the time. Like, can I see a real picture of that animal or something?
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, let's do it. And I'll learn something most of the time by looking that up.
Sure.
So you're exactly right.
Is that real, or is that a made up thing, or is that, and they want to know.
Right.
Yeah. I used to have a rule when my kids are in their 20s. And in some ways that's a relief, because I used to have a rule where they were not allowed to ask me physics questions after 7 p.m. because I was done. My brain was done. I didn't want
checked out.
Sometimes I'm like, man, maybe I wasn't a very good mom because I should have just let them ask questions. But sometimes you just reach your limit in the day.
Absolutely.
Okay. So finding you mentioned a minute ago about helping parents keep their kids safe online. I know there's some other. Are you familiar with any other places that they can go? Other people's maybe works that we can point people to? I know we can put it in the notes for sure.
Yeah. So shortly after I created my book, I was aware, and usually because people reached out, and I did do some, searching online to see if this was done before, because this isn't something I was probably going to do unless, it was new and novel. Marcus Carey came out with a book, I believe shortly after, called The Three Little Hackers, or Three Little Hackers, just Three Little Hackers.
Okay.
I bought that book, and I thought it was great. He really focused on the privacy aspect, and I don't want to give too much away about the book, but I do recommend it. I thought it was a good story, and it makes kids think about, being safe online. And again, almost to those points in the back of my book where I talk about, common sense things like, don't give out information to strangers and things like that. His story plays right into that, and that's perfect. Think and Code is another one that Marcus Carey created. And I came across several little ones like Skada and Me, and really cute looking books that other people had done that were either IT focused or cybersecurity focused in some way. And I love that I'm seeing more and more of that. This isn't something I feel like, I certainly don't have the market cornered, and I don't want to have the market cornered in this. I think the more material, the better. So I encourage people to create content for children. And I'm excited to see more and more, courses, and there's companies getting involved that are creating content for children around security and privacy. That's awesome.
We had Vandana Verma on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, and she started up a group called InfoSec Kids. And then
it's awesome.
There's a lot of groups that when they start with like more cybersecurity for women, or other minority communities, bringing in people who typically aren't known to be heavily involved with cybersecurity, they tend to have some type of arm that has to do with children. So I'm sure there's a lot of resources out there, and we'll definitely have links in the show notes for people who want to learn more about that. But like I said at the beginning of this, I'm assuming that a lot of people who are adults are not actually buying these for their kids, because I'm putting this on my shelf, and I'm really excited about having this as part of my library. Do you get that feedback from other adults as well?
Yeah, it's funny, Jen. I do, and thanks for saying that. It's funny. I get a lot of feedback around, these are for my kids. I bought 2 copies. These are for my kids, and these are for me. I don't want my kids like dinging up the corners, things like that. Or I don't even have kids, and I love these books here. Things like that. I love feedback. It's one of the most rewarding things about making this book, is getting a message about it. And, I really want positive and negative feedback. So I'm scouring Twitter for comments about the book, even if they didn't tag me specifically in it. So if you're listening to this and you have the book, I would love some feedback. No pressure at all. I just want to make sure everybody enjoys it. And specifically when I made the other 2 books, I wanted to make sure it lived up to the expectation of the original. But yeah, I do see a lot of people, especially in our profession, they buy them for themselves and they put it on their desk, or, they put it in the background of their webcast, which I think is really cool. I reached out to the people at MITRE because I was thinking about using their attack framework in one of the books. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way because I came up with a different letter for A that I thought fit better. But I got some really, really encouraging feedback from them that a lot of people that work there, have their books on display proudly on their desk and things like that. And so, I'm like, nobody knows who I am. This is really neat to be able to talk to people. And then, my buddy was watching a Black Hills webcast that they do. And in the background of John Strand's office, he has, my 3 books on display, and even gives me a shout out in it. And I thought that is really neat that, these cybersecurity professionals that everybody knows, it's getting into the hands of a lot of people. And I never expected that when I first created this. And I'm humbled by the whole thing and excited by it. I think it's really, really neat.
Those Black Hills people I kind of stalk them online because I think they're really cool. They've got a
Yes.
lot of good things going on, and like you, I love the podcast because I get to talk to interesting people in the industry as well. And come to think about it, if as a listener, if you have somebody that you think would be great on this show, reach out, let me know. I would love to talk to new people, and I certainly don't know everybody in the industry, but they have a great way of gamifying incident response.
Yes.
And when you can gamify that and it's not a drag, it really is a great way to improve the security stance of any organization. And so in the community, I know early on there was a lot of kind of maybe some gatekeeping, people keeping other people out of cybersecurity, and I just don't feel that anymore. It feels like a very open,
True.
inclusive, welcoming community, and I do a lot of mentoring. People often ask me, well, how do I get these broader conversations? How do I network? How do I get to meet these people who I find compelling? How do I be more part of the community? And one of the best ways to do it is to start contributing to the community. So like you did,
Yep.
You start putting things out there, people will, especially if you're doing it in a positive, supportive way that is trying to better the community, other people will rally around that and support your efforts.
Yeah, and even the community itself, it kind of bothers me to see sides fighting over, fighting each other, like the red team and the blue team. I don't like to see a divide. Sometimes you see almost these Twitter wars, and I get it. Some red teams think they're really elite or something because sense of security, and then they almost look down on the blue team or vice versa. And I think, no, we're all here together. Yeah. We all play a role. We need each other. Mm-hmm. There's definitely two sides to this, and it could be argued there's more sides than that. Even, we need every area of security. Everybody plays a part. And so that also kind of motivated me to come out with the red team and the blue team books, because I wanted to show, from my own background, I love the red team. I still love the red team. I do, I jump in and do incident response still because I love it so much. And I used to do digital forensics. So let's take that and put that into these books, and then also make the red team, and let's make them balanced. And I tried in the concepts, if you look at the red and blue team, I just had fun with it, and I played off certain concepts back and forth between the two, and I tried to tell a little bit of a story with certain terms.
Right.
So, like the dragons were the blue team, and they were defending a castle or some, something like that. And then the red team are these robots, and they're kind of invasive. They're trying to sneak in the castle. They're even impersonating, I is for impersonation in the red team. They're dressing up like a dragon to see if they can sneak into the castle. And then you'll see that same robot later dropping a Dropbox, and D is for Dropbox or something. So things like that. Nice. I try to put some in some page, and then I'll reference them in the other book. And that's just for parents that just happen to know it. I try to put little Easter eggs in there to make it fun for the parents too.
Well, I'm going to have to get your other two books because I love dragons. They're my favorite thing. And I love that you use them for blue team because I'm solidly blue team. But even on blue team, you have to know how red team thinks and how red team works, or you can't
Absolutely.
be successful at blue team. And so knowing what those balances are, I think is really important. And I'm glad that you talked about that, about the a little bit of push-pull sometimes in the community between different groups. But I think some competition and challenge of each other is healthy, but looking down on another group, that doesn't get us anywhere. But
no. Yeah.
I'm not on Twitter because I find it to be a cesspool.
Yeah, Twitter is not the best place to get cybersecurity information.
No, it's really, I shouldn't have said that, but I hope that isn't too rude. But it just feels really uncomfortable to be on Twitter. It seems like it's just people trying to make a point but not listening. And so I find a lot of value in these face-to-face conversations. And since we don't have conferences happening still, it's hard to get that.
Yes.
And that's, I think, one of the valuable things in going to a conference is not, well, can I get this information anywhere else? Of course you can. Information is free. I think we talked about that, right? But going to a conference, you get to talk to people in person about ideas and thoughts and these concepts that it brings some real value to having that conversation with other people who are excited about the same concepts.
Absolutely, yeah. And you do learn a lot just being there in person. There's something about it. I know, the kind people at Circle CityCon. I'm in Indianapolis, so Circle CityCon, is like 30 minutes from my house. So the kind people at Circle CityCon last year were going to allow me to set up a booth for next to nothing. And because they believed in the project and they thought it was really neat, what we were doing for the community. And so I was going to take that opportunity to set up a booth and more than anything, just get to see people in person. Right. And I was excited not to have to charge people for shipping. I thought, well, that'd be cool if they walk by, they save some money and I get to meet people. And then the pandemic hit, of course. So that kind of shut down everything.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get back out there when, everything opens up again and we can safely all get together and go to these conferences again.
Me too. I speak at a lot of, even virtually, I spoke at a lot of conferences this year, but, and it might surprise people to know, I get so anxious just before getting, the night before, I don't sleep, and it's honestly terrifying standing up in front of people and talking. Why do I do it? Because of these opportunities, because it lets me then talk to people about what I'm excited about. And so it's worth it to me to go through that.
Yes.
Not feeling super great in order to have these personal face-to-face conversations that happen at conferences. So I'm so hope that those are going to open up again soon, because I would love to see people in person. Well,
yeah, and look at you now. You're an amazing podcast host.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Some life takes you in weird directions, and I'm so fortunate that I get to be hosting this podcast and meeting people. So it's been an absolute delight talking with you, Curtis. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book and talking about the things that drive you and make you excited about cybersecurity. Tell me the URL for people to go and purchase books from you.
Yeah, so it's cybersecurityabcs.com, which is the longer version. Mm-hmm. It's really just a redirect for msformalware.com, which is the original title.
Okay.
I sell it exclusively on my site. So you might see it on places like Amazon. You referenced earlier, I did try to sell it on Amazon. I did sell it successfully on Amazon, if you call it that. I lost money because I'm not very good with budgeting, apparently, and miscalculated all of that. So I had to take it off of Amazon so it could be profitable and sell it directly on my own site. So right now, that's the only place you can get it, unless I do, sell it in person. I'm hoping to take it to some conferences. I'm hoping to give them out to libraries. I have a lot of copies that are extra that I'm hoping to either give away to people in the community, or I would love to just start shipping them to random libraries throughout the U.S. And so hopefully people can, rent those at their local library.
Nice.
If they want to.
Yeah. Before we go, I wanted to give you the instructions for entering our giveaway for this very cute book. Whether it's for you, for your desk, for one of your kids, for a colleague, I'll bet you know a colleague who would love to have this. And I mean, it's hard sometimes to find good gifts for nerds. This is definitely one of them. Here's how we're going to do it. Go to YouTube. Even if you're an audio listener, we need you to go to YouTube, subscribe, and leave a comment about, something you heard on the show that you enjoyed, something about Curtis's book. People who leave comments, we'll choose 5 of the people who leave comments and get the book to you. If you don't win, or if you would like to support Curtis, which I think is a great idea. He puts so much time and effort into these books and his own money. Go over to msformalware.com. We'll have the links in the show notes. Go and buy a book. Well, terrific. We'll definitely put all of those links that we've talked about today in the podcast. We'll put them in the show notes. And again, super happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of SecurityMetrics podcast, click on the box on the left. If you prefer to listen to this podcast, it's available on all your favorite podcast platforms. See you on the slopes.